I mean, like, there's no excuses, so, you know, the ice was just tough, and so we came on back to us and started getting engaged, but, it is what it is, and I was being really the best for him for last night. You have to look at it as positive, right? Like, we're coming off of a loss. It's a good opportunity for us to go and finish this place on a win, and that's how I have to look, and, everybody's tired, everybody's sore, who cares? You know, figure out a way to make this thing feel better, and see that thing go play.
Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever were battling for every possession against the New York Liberty. But the closing minutes took an unexpected turn when Clark was nowhere to be seen on the court. Then came her response, and it raised even more questions than it answered. Music. What really happened on the bench? Why was she absent during the most important moments of the game? And what did Caitlin finally reveal?
To take on the New York Liberty. Now, we are in the midst of sabotage. We are in the midst of a lot of nonsense going on with this team. A bonehead bozo clown put on her red nose of a coach in Stephanie White. She's having spaz attacks and losing her mind every time Caitlin Clark shoots the.
The easiest thing Caitlin Clark could have done after the Indiana Fever's loss to the Music New York Liberty was point the finger somewhere else, because there were plenty of places where she could have placed the blame.
If you're a fan of the Indiana Fever against the New York Liberty, but as I always say, and I start so many of these videos out, being an Indiana Fever fan is not for the faint of heart. I actually can't even remember the last time they took their starters out early. The Indiana Fever seem to always be in that crunch time, just like grinding it out for a win. And they almost had it after being down by 10 at the free throw line, of which the Indiana Fever shot an abysmal 50.
She could have blamed the brutal schedule, the constant travel, the physical defense, the missed calls, or even those 2 free throws that suddenly became the internet's favorite talking point. Instead, Clark directed the attention back toward herself. And that response says far more about her mindset than one difficult game ever could.
First half, ISOing all day, no teamwork, slow basketball, the ball not moving around. I mean, it's ridiculous work what we're doing out here. Then we get to the closing side of the game. AB going up with a contested shot. I mean, I don't know what she was throwing up at the end. Caitlin Clark throwing up a contested shot. I don't know what she had going on with this ISO stuff. Why are we ISOing when we just saw evidence that if we run the pick and roll, we can get a good look. We can get a good look, right? The entire first half was nasty work. ISO this, ISO that. I mean, my eyes felt like somebody dropped lemon.
But why is every mistake she makes treated like a judgment on her entire career? And how much pressure can one player realistically handle before people finally acknowledge that she's being asked to carry an extraordinary amount?
This is exactly how I feel. Another game. Now, I made a video talking about Breanna Stewart, telling the world what Dallas did to stop the Fever. They gave y'all the game plan they was going to do to stop y'all publicly. And yet again, she run the offense through Kelsey.
By the time Indiana arrived for this matchup with New York, the Fever were already dealing with a kind of schedule that would make even the most experienced traveler wonder whether the league had somehow confused a basketball calendar with a punishment program. Indiana has spent large portions of the season moving across states, playing on the road, and music, jumping from one demanding matchup to the next while trying to maintain consistency in a league where the margin for error is already incredibly small. And somehow, in the middle of all that travel and movement, Caitlin Clark is still expected to perform like a machine. She's expected to score, create shots, run the offense, make the right read, limit turnovers, defend, absorb contact, stay healthy, deliver in clutch moments, and apparently never miss a free throw because the moment she does, social media reacts as if someone has pulled a fire alarm. That's the unusual reality surrounding Clark right now. The expectations are massive because her impact has been massive. But those expectations have also created a strange environment where an ordinary bad night can suddenly become proof that she's music. Overrated, selfish, inconsistent, or somehow responsible for every issue Indiana faces. One missed shot can become a headline when your name is Caitlin Clark, and suddenly a single moment is treated as though it explains an entire game. One turnover becomes a debate about decision-making. One difficult possession becomes evidence that something is supposedly wrong. And 2 missed free throws can send social media into a full-scale investigation before the players have even left the arena. That's the reality Clark continues to deal with because the standards surrounding her have become so extreme that a normal off night can end up feeling like a national referendum on her ability.
White, but she's lost her damn mind. You got a big man in Aaliyah Boston who refuses to pass the ball to the best player in the league in Caitlin Clark. She refuses to do a dribble handoff. She never hands it off. She always wants to fake it and then go one-on-one. You also have a big in Aaliyah Boston who doesn't set real screens. I mean, it's a bunch of sabotage going on. Let's be clear here. The Indiana Fever are an absolute joke right now, mainly because the coach and the big man, and this ain't even a Kelsey thing. Like, at the end of the day, we know Kelsey's just going to shoot. She's just going to score. Caitlin and Kelsey have been fine as a backcourt. They've been the ones carrying this team for the most part. It's almost like Aaliyah Boston started to feel left out.
The loss to the New York Liberty was another example of that pressure. Indiana was facing one of the most talented teams in the league. The game remained competitive, and every possession became more important as the clock moved closer to the final minutes. Clark had opportunities she would probably like to have back, including music. The 2 free throws that became one of the biggest talking points after the game. But the most revealing part of the story wasn't simply that she missed them. It was how she responded to the disappointment. Instead of acting as though the mistakes never happened, Clark took responsibility for them and focused on what she could do better. That may sound simple, but in the environment surrounding her right now, it actually says a lot about her mindset. She understands that being a competitor doesn't mean making every shot or making the right decision on every possession. It means being willing to look at mistakes honestly and then use them as motivation rather than allowing them to become a lasting source of frustration. That mentality matters because Clark is operating under a level of scrutiny that very few players have experienced this early in their careers. If she makes a difficult three-pointer, the reaction can be enormous. But if she misses that same shot a few nights later, some people immediately begin questioning whether she should have taken it at all. If she threads an incredible pass through traffic, she gets praised for her vision. But if that same type of pass results in a turnover, critics can suddenly act as if creativity itself was the problem.
Of this game, they were going band for band, trading buckets, but the defense on both ends was just so bad. Everyone was getting blown by. People on the Liberty were getting blown by. People on the Indiana Fever were getting blown by the Liberty. So I can't say that this was one of those like can't miss first beginnings of the game, though it did end up getting that way in the fourth quarter. The Liberty started coming away with a 10-point lead against the Indiana Fever. Did not know if the Fever could pick it back up, but they went on a run. It was a 3-point game.
That is an incredibly difficult balance for any player to maintain. Clark has to stay aggressive enough to make the plays that have made her such a dangerous weapon, while also understanding that those same risks will occasionally lead to mistakes. A high-level playmaker cannot eliminate every turnover without also removing some of the ambition that creates difficult assists. A confident shooter cannot guarantee that every shot will go in. And a player who wants the ball in crucial moments cannot expect every decision made under pressure to be the right one. That's simply the reality of professional basketball. The physical side of the game makes the challenge even tougher. Clark has had to adjust to defenders who know that giving her comfortable space isn't an option. That means she regularly faces aggressive pressure, physical contact, bumps around screens, and defenders determined to make every possession as uncomfortable as possible. Some of that physicality is simply part of competitive basketball, while other moments become controversial when fans believe officials should have made a different call. Either way, the reality is that Clark is rarely allowed to operate in a comfortable environment. She has to create offense against constant pressure while knowing that thousands of people are watching every possession and that the consequences of every decision become magnified because of the attention surrounding her. When she makes a difficult pass, people praise her vision. When that same type of pass results in a mistake, people question her judgment. When she attacks the basket, defenders collapse around her. And when she draws contact, another debate begins over whether the whistle should have been blown.
In that game, it was hurting me, fam. Oh my goodness. Then we get to the second half, we get to the third quarter, right? Late in the third, we start to figure out, if we run the pick and roll, we can not only get Caitlin a mid-range shot, not only get somebody a lay at the rim, we can also not take the shot and find an Aaliyah Boston in the corner. We can find a Sophie in the corner if we just take our time and focus and move the ball around, not panic. Then all of a sudden we figure that out. Oh my goodness, look how it works. Look how it works. Then Aaliyah Boston gets the ball in the corner, doesn't rush the shot, gets downhill on the baseline, and guess who we find? Sophie Cunningham in the corner.
That is a lot for one player to process while still trying to read a defense in real time. The pressure doesn't disappear once the game starts. If anything, it becomes even louder. Indiana has become one of the most closely watched teams in women's basketball, and Clark is obviously at the center of that attention. The Fever are no longer just another team on the schedule. Their games have become major events, and the amount of interest surrounding the franchise has changed dramatically. That attention is valuable, but it also comes with a cost. Every opponent wants to beat Indiana, and every defender understands that slowing down Clark can completely change the rhythm of the Fever's offense. Fans expect memorable performances, critics wait for mistakes, supporters look for highlights, and social media always seems ready to turn whatever happens next into a debate. Clark has to perform in the middle of all that noise. At the same time, Indiana has been dealing with a demanding schedule that requires the team to travel across different states, constantly adjust to new environments, prepare for different opponents, and recover quickly before doing it all over again. When a team is moving from one road game to the next, the physical demands don't disappear simply because another matchup has been placed on the calendar. That context doesn't excuse every mistake, and it shouldn't. Clark doesn't seem interested in making excuses anyway. That's one of the most interesting parts of her reaction. She's not saying she should never be criticized. She's not acting as though every mistake needs to be explained away.
Indiana Fever, the problem in tonight's game, going up against the New York Liberty. Okay, the lead changed like 6 times. Okay, let me see. Yeah, the lead changed 6 times, and they were tied 7 times in tonight's game. The biggest issue that the Indiana Fever ran into when going up against the New York Liberty in tonight's game was the free throws. They missed so many free throw shots at crunch time, guys. And I don't want to just drag Caitlin Clark, okay? Because again,
instead, she appears to approach difficult performances with the mindset that there is always something she can improve. That's the mentality of a true competitor. A player who only wants praise will search for reasons why a mistake was someone else's fault. A player who genuinely wants to get better will eventually ask what they could have done differently, even when other factors clearly played a role in the outcome. Clark has shown that willingness to look inward music, and that quality could become even more important as her career continues to develop. She knows she will miss shots. She knows she will commit turnovers. She knows there will be possessions where she makes the wrong read. She knows defenders will sometimes win the battle. She also understands that none of those moments can be allowed to define the next possession. That's what makes the missed free throws more interesting than the criticism surrounding them. Of course, those shots mattered. Free throws late in a close game are important, and if Clark had made both attempts, the situation could have looked very different. There's no reason to pretend otherwise simply because she's a superstar. But recognizing the importance of those shots is not the same thing as saying they define her. A basketball game contains countless possessions, decisions, defensive rotations, missed opportunities, successful plays, and moments that never become viral clips. Reducing an entire performance to 2 free throws ignores everything that happened before those attempts.
Would be here. The story of the 2026 Indiana Fever, they're not winning the championship, guys. I'm going to just be honest with you. I don't believe they're winning the championship. They're lucky if they get into the playoffs. I believe that they're going to be knocked out in the first round. This has nothing to do with Caitlin Clark. Nothing to do with Caitlin Clark. If I'm Caitlin Clark, I'm talking to my agent right now. We're negotiating, and we're getting me the hell out of Indiana, bro. I don't even think getting a new coach could fix this. Granted, Stephanie White get a lot of the blame, but majority of the blame needs to be spearheaded and gone to none other than Amber.
It also ignores the fact that Clark has already done an enormous amount for Indiana. She has helped change the way defenses approach the Fever, created opportunities for her teammates, added another level of perimeter playmaking, stretched opposing defenses with her shooting range, and become a major part of the franchise's identity. The attention surrounding Indiana has changed dramatically as well. The same people who acknowledge how much attention Clark brings to the Fever can sometimes turn around and expect her to personally solve every music problem the team encounters. If Indiana wins, the conversation becomes about Clark's brilliance. If Indiana loses, the conversation can quickly shift toward Clark's shortcomings. But basketball simply doesn't work that way. The difference between a good player and a great competitor is not necessarily the number of mistakes they make. More often, it's about what they do after those mistakes happen. That's why Clark's response matters. She's not treating the loss as proof that she can't perform under pressure. She's treating it as another opportunity to identify areas where she can improve. That mindset is especially important because she's still developing as a professional player. She's already accomplished a tremendous amount, but there is still a long career ahead of her. She's learning how opponents want to defend her, learning how to manage the physical demands of a WNBA schedule, learning how to handle different defensive schemes, and learning how to balance the expectations surrounding her with the reality of being one player on a team. Nobody should expect that process to be flawless.
I said the wins and losses weren't that important in the middle of this stretch for the Fever, considering the schedule. As I put it, it's diabolical. But there's some frustration points from it. The most important thing was them getting out healthy. That wasn't exactly the case. Myisha Hines-Allen looked to be holding her arm, looked to be in a lot of pain. There was no update after the game about her status, but there were some pain points from the way the Fever have played, really going back to some of that tempo game, but obviously in Dallas and then in this one as well. Some of that can be chalked up to fatigue. Some of that is some patterns that we've seen. The last 43 seconds or so will be pointed out a lot because Caitlin Clark was involved, who I thought played pretty well overall in this game, but she's looking for a foul on Fever.
The criticism, however, often ignores the difference between a player having a bad moment and a player being a bad player. Those are two completely different things. Clark can have a poor shooting night without suddenly losing her ability to shoot. She can miss 2 free throws without suddenly forgetting how to make free throws. She can make one questionable decision without suddenly becoming an ineffective playmaker. That sounds obvious, yet social media has a remarkable way of turning a single moment into a complete evaluation of someone's career. And that's where some of the reaction to those missed attempts becomes excessive. For the people celebrating those misses as if Clark has somehow been exposed, there is a rather inconvenient reality waiting for them. An uncomfortable moment only becomes part of a player's development if they refuse to let it become a permanent identity. Clark has already experienced both sides of that equation. She has had games where everything seemed to go right, followed by nights where every mistake was magnified. She's experienced extraordinary praise and equally intense criticism, sometimes within the same week. That kind of emotional swing can be difficult for anyone to navigate. The danger comes when outside opinions become more important than internal standards. If Clark starts playing simply to avoid criticism, she risks losing the aggressiveness that makes her so effective. If she becomes afraid to attempt difficult passes because people will criticize turnovers, she becomes less dangerous. If she stops taking shots because a miss will generate backlash, then the defense has already won.
She only had 2 turnovers. And I say only, okay, because it could be, we already know she can be somewhat of a Tammy turnover, a turnover Tammy, so to speak, if you will, rather. And in tonight's game, I believe 2 turnovers, that's fair, okay? She still managed to put up 21 points, okay, and she also had 4 rebounds. But she was 1 of 4 from the free throw line. She was 9 of 18 from the field, as well as 2 of 6 from the three-point line. She was 25% from the three-point line, from shooting, from the 3. Okay, but again, they had Aaliyah Boston to pick it up. Kelsey Mitchell was a one-woman army all on her own, like she usually is every.
The better approach is exactly what she appears to be doing. Accept the mistake, learn from it, and keep competing. That is why the story should not end with 2 missed free throws. Those attempts are part of the story, but they are not the entire story. The bigger story is about a player carrying enormous expectations while navigating an increasingly demanding schedule, absorbing constant physical pressure from opponents, dealing with intense scrutiny, and still choosing to hold herself accountable when things do not go according to plan.
Goes to the ground here, looks for a foul call, doesn't get it. Then back on the other side, there is the foul that is called on Caitlin, or I think Caitlin got the foul call there, sends the Liberty to the free throw line. And then, this is the replay, by the way, and you can see, it's probably a foul. The arm is in there. Probably should have gotten the call, but sometimes you don't get those calls at the end of the game. The problem is, it feels like Caitlin Clark never gets those calls, so you see where the frustration comes from a little bit right there. Caitlin goes to the free throw line and misses 2 foul shots. She has not shot free throws.
In fact, difficult moments can become some of the most valuable experiences for an elite competitor because they reveal the areas that still need improvement. Clark does not need everyone telling her that she is perfect. She needs the ability to learn, adjust, and continue growing. And when Caitlin Clark steps back onto the court, those 2 missed free throws will still be part of the record from what happened against New York, but they will not determine what happens next. That is the part many critics may be overlooking. Caitlin Clark is going to miss shots again. She is going to make mistakes again. She is going to have another difficult night at some point. But she is also going to have another opportunity to respond. And if her reaction to this loss is any indication, she will not be running away from that opportunity. She will be looking for it. Because the real test of a competitor is not whether they can avoid failure when everything is going well. The real test is whether they can take a disappointing moment, learn from it, and return with enough confidence to demand the ball again. That is exactly what Indiana needs from Caitlin Clark. And for everyone celebrating those 2 missed free throws as though they have already written the final chapter, there is one problem with that conclusion. The story is nowhere near over.